Well guys, I've been doing a lot of research into solar for home crypto mining and GPU mining. In this video, I'm gonna make a decision. Am I going to install solar for my mining farm? So as I mentioned, the past month or so, especially when profits were really bad for GPU mining, I started really digging into solar and if it's feasible to do even a small 1,000-watt solar setup at home just to make your GPU slightly more profitable. And I found some interesting things and I wanted to share a lot of this information with you guys.
Want to buy a new Asic miner but not sure which one to purchase? Check out today's sponsor, asicprices.com. Their website offers an intuitive way to research before your Asic purchase. You can sort by ROI if that's your thing, or daily profit. Don't forget to set your electric rate to make sure the results are accurate. Interested in only Caspa Asics? Switch the algorithm drop down and sort by Caspa only. See one you want? Select it and view a variety of useful information before your purchase. Historical revenue, historical price data. You can even break it down to price per hash for each specific vendor. Though I don't have any ASICs yet, I've been closely watching asicprices.com to find the perfect buying opportunity. Special thanks to Asic Prices for sponsoring this video. I'll leave a link down below.
Really, there is two options for going solar. Before I start any of this, let me preface, I'm by no means a solar expert. I've just done a lot of research into it the past month or so, and all of my kind of calculations and thoughts are gonna apply to 11-cent kilowatt hour. If you're at like 30-cent kilowatt hour, then these calculations may change drastically and it might be worth it for you to go solar. So first off, in my opinion, I think there's basically two routes you can go if you're gonna go solar for home crypto mining, and that's either the battery option or a grid tie system. That what that means is it's gonna tie directly into your circuit panel and it's gonna get used by your house as you're using electricity, but if at any point it's generating more than what you're using, then it's gonna be backfed into the system, and generally your power company will apply you credits for that backfed power. So those are the first two main options and the main ones I considered. There's also somewhat of a third option, and this one is a little over my head, but I'm gonna throw a clip of this video on here where this guy, Brad Cagle, he does a ton of solar and stuff like that. He is somehow hooking up a panel directly to a mining rig, and it's basically running off that panel and a wall outlet at the same time, utilizing the solar first. So if solar's in full blast, that rig might only be pulling 100 watts. If the clouds come out, then all of a sudden that rig's automatically pulling 300 watts. Now, I don't think this is a grid tie system. I think he has it isolated, but that's the third option that might be worth exploring, but it was a little over my head. So let's talk about my thoughts on the battery system versus the grid system. Well, for 11-cent power, I really just don't think it makes sense to go the battery route. And that's because the batteries are so expensive for home crypto mining that it's gonna take your ROI just too far, to the point where it's really not worth it to get those batteries. And I'm not even sure exactly what the price is for those batteries, but I know they're expensive, and I know that even a grid tie system is borderline too expensive to make it worth it. So the batteries themselves are just, your ROI is gonna be way too long if you're getting them solely for crypto mining. So what are my thoughts on the grid tie system then? Well, when I first heard about it, I was looking into this company called Hoy Miles, and they build microinverters. So basically you can just take two 500-watt panels and plug them into one like $300 microinverter, and then you have the cables to get it to your house, which are somewhat expensive if you have a long run. The closer you can get it to your house, the cheaper it's gonna be. But then you just wire that into your panel and boom, you have a grid tie system for a $300 microinverter and maybe $500 worth of panels if you can get a good deal on them. So that really piqued my interest. A grid tie system for $800, that seems awesome. But there's some caveats to that I didn't realize until later. So if you do a grid tie system and you're gonna be backfeeding power to the power company, then you need to get permits and basically get approved, because the power company needs to know if you're gonna be backfeeding watts onto their network basically. And the issue comes with that permit. You have to get full engineering plans done for your system, how many kilowatt hours it's gonna produce, etc. And that plan, you normally need to hire an engineer to do it. So that takes that grid tie system from a very budget option to pretty expensive. And I didn't get full quotes on that, but it was gonna be pretty expensive. So that somewhat kind of rules out the grid tie system if you have to get all of these permits. But there is another option for the grid tie system, and it's a little riskier, but something that I was considering but ended up not really jumping into, is that if you have that, let's say 800 watt system that I said with the 2 panels and your Hoymiles inverter, you can run that directly into the PDU that's running your mining rigs. And basically, if you're always using more power than the solar that's being generated, then nothing is being backfed to the system, and your power company would have no idea that you're actually using solar. Now that's super enticing. That allows you to skip that whole permit process and get up and running for less than $1,000 for a pretty significant system. The issue is, the more I started thinking of it, is what happens if I lose internet for 30 minutes and these rigs drop down to using 500 watts and my panels are still outside generating 1,000 watts. Well, now I'm backfeeding and I can't control it. It's just because the internet dropped. Or if I want to reboot a rig to update a flight sheet and the power drops for a second, those solar panels are going to be inputting to the grid. So it sounds like a better idea than it really is. I knew that at some point I would make a mistake, forget to unplug the panels or something before I turned off a rig, and the power company would end up finding out about that. And at that point, I didn't want to be $1,000 invested into solar, and the power company either forced me to turn it off or forced me to get permits, which would add another $2,000+ to my small little solar operation. So real quickly, I wanted to give a shout out to Todd from North Carolina Solar Electric LLC. He was super helpful in basically answering any questions I had on the solar stuff, because I was diving in and just had a lot of questions on it. Todd has a YouTube channel, I'll link down below, and he's got a website for his business. If you have any questions on solar or maybe even want to get a solar setup, he can help you out. He was incredibly helpful, and his YouTube channel is also great for just some basic understanding. So thank you, Todd. I'm gonna leave all his information down below. So if you haven't already noticed, I'm not gonna go for solar. It doesn't make sense in my situation, but there is still some situations where it might make sense. And the main reason that it doesn't make sense for me is I have a huge oak tree in the front yard that shades my entire roof 90% of the day, and even a lot of the backyard. It's that big. I'll throw a clip up. The one way that solar might make sense, getting a grid tie system and pulling the permits and everything, would be if you're gonna do a whole home solar setup. Now, in that case, you're gonna be paying more upfront for the panels, the microinverters, the installation, but the permit cost, which is basically dead cost, you don't get anything from it, is gonna be a much smaller proportion of that cost than it is on just a 2-panel system. That permit cost ends up being like 50+% of the actual cost. So if I didn't have that oak tree, I really was considering doing a full house solar setup, even at my relatively low electric rate, because the Hoymiles systems really are just incredibly cheap for what you get out of them. The reason I didn't do it is that tree, and if I was gonna take the tree down, that's like another $10,000, and then ROI for this whole project's just out the window. So for you guys, things to consider, if you're at 30-cent power, maybe it does make sense to look into solar. I know Chump Change has an awesome solar setup with batteries, and now that I think about it, batteries may make sense if they cost less than the cost to get a permit for a grid tie system. You basically need to do the math on that and see if it's worth it or not. If you have super expensive electric, then it makes a lot more sense to get those panels, because you're gonna ROI a lot quicker on the actual panels themselves. So that's my talking head video on solar mining for home crypto. Hopefully you found something helpful. If you're not gonna go solar and still wanna know how to save your GPU mining farm and prevent turning off Check out this video. I go through a bunch of things that I did to keep my farm running when profits are low. See you guys next time. Peace.